Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Donna Conwell.
My name is Kelly Sicat, and we're your hosts for Scratch Space.
Scratch Space is a virtual forum hosted by the Lucas Artist Residency Program at Montalvo Art Center, which is located in Saratoga, California, on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people. With Scratch Space, we are bringing together visual artists, scholars, composers, activists, writers, and others to explore what kinds of radical imaginaries can unfold in this moment of pandemic, racial reckoning, economic uncertainty, civil unrest, and environmental crisis.
We're interested in how we think about what's possible, how we can use our imaginations to build a better present and future, and how we can retool and create better and more equitable models for living and working together. So Donna, tell us about our guests today.
Well, I'm thrilled that we have with us today poet Natalie Diaz. Natalie is director of the Center for Imagination in the Borderlands and the Maxine and Jonathan Marshall Chair in Modern and Contemporary Poetry at Arizona State University. She is the author of Post-Colonial Love Poem, which came out this year through Grey Wolf Press, and is a finalist for the 2020 National Book Award for Poetry. And also When My Brother Was an Aztec, which was published by Copper Canyon Press in 2012 and won an American Book Award. And Natalie is calling in from Phoenix, Arizona today. And we're also joined by Maria Hupfield, a transdisciplinary artist operating at the intersections of community, craft, visual art, and Native feminism. She's based in Brooklyn and an assistant professor of Indigenous Digital Arts and Performance at the University of Toronto. Maria's solo show, 9 Years Towards the Sun, opened at the Heard Museum in Phoenix, Arizona in December 2019 and is open through November 15th. She is an inaugural Borderland Fellow with the Center for Imagination in the Borderlands at Arizona State University and the Viralis Center for Art and Politics at the New School in New York City. And Maria is joining us today from Toronto. So we're going to be doing things a little differently today. Maria and Natalie have been working closely together to create a conversation as a kind of collaborative performance event. And so Kelly and I will disappear off screen shortly and hand over to Maria and Natalie for the rest of our time today. So thank you.
I'm very excited for this. Links to our guests will be found in the chat, as well as links to the website of the Heard Museum, the exhibition. And I want to thank Nathan Zanon for being with us today as our producer. I also want to thank Maria and Natalie for being with us today. As you hear them through the course of the program, please send your questions to chat. And if they can, they'll be picking up the questions along the way and answering them in real time. And Donna and I will come back towards the end of the program, about 5 minutes to 1, and answer any additional questions with Maria and Natalie. See you soon.
Soon.
It's looking good over there. That's right, taking it a little bit closer. Let's go see who is outside. Oh, it's so beautiful and sunny there.
Natalie is currently reconnecting to the Wi-Fi, so we're just looking at your installation while she does that.
Here we are outside of the Heard Museum, looking at the installation. I have to say that it is really good to see, really good to see this work again. I'm currently in Toronto, and it's a beautiful rainy day over here. I can see why people, we have here in Canada what are called the snowbirds, Canadians who will fly down to Arizona and season in during the winter months.
I'm back. Can you hear me okay? And what have I missed so far?
We've just been waiting for you.
Okay, I'm here. And yeah, bienvenido, gracias. It's really lucky to welcome all of you who are out there in the cyberspace and digital. One, to my homeland, to Akamel Atom land, also the Peeposh land, who are cousins of ours. And so it's an incredible part of a conversation, a larger conversation and a larger migratory relationship with us here and our imaginations, and being able to host and receive Maria's show along with the herd. So we are right now out in the garden. And what you see behind me is one of Maria's pieces. Something I'll just add quickly. I'm outside alone, and so I will put my mask on when we go back inside. So I wanted just to let everybody know that. And then, of course, we're following all the protocols and washing our hands and things. And something that we will do just to invite you into this space and to receive you in the space that we're doing is, you know, we understand that we all have different sensualities. And so one of the things that we would like to do is to try to address and engage those sensualities as we are moving through the show and our conversation and with you all. And so one of the things I just wanted to let you all know is we're out here in the garden. Phoenix, I think maybe is still high 90s. I don't know what it feels like where you are, Maria. I can hear a lot of the vehicles moving by, but there are also a lot of birds chirping and tweeting. And this garden smells really good. There are a lot of desert plants out here. Yeah, so it's really beautiful. But we're glad to be out here and to have you. And shall we head in, or? Yeah.
Still in.
Yeah.
So
You'll see too, there's some furnitures and things that are part of Maria's work and imagination. So
thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And to be able to see those social sculptures outdoors and to get a sense of what it's like to be in that space. Very different than where I am right now, where we're entering the fall, the leaves have changed, it's raining, we're moving into the winter. So it's, you know, it really is a joy to be able to see Phoenix and to be able to see the exhibition and walk through that together. So thank you so much.
yeah, for sure. So we are now entering in. So one of the things that we wanted to do was begin you where the show begins. In some ways, there are some pieces outside, but here we have. Actually, I can do a better job of showing. And Maria, you can join in too to talk about what we're seeing and some of the textures that it's made of.
Oh yeah, Great. Oh, it's so good to see those two chairs. So these are two chairs that are designed for Wave Hill back in New York. So they're usually outdoors in this beautiful garden, outdoor space. And I've just modified them and kind of reclaimed them for this exhibition.
One of the things I love, just talking texture, just real quickly, is like the edges they're edges. You can feel the edges and the corners of them. And I love that because I feel like as I'm sitting in these, which one of the lucky things about joining Maria here is I get to touch everything. And but I also think that's something that feels so important about your work, Maria, is, I think a lot about, and we've had brief conversations about this, but also the idea of when art is held away from our bodies and held away from us as peoples. And so what it means to imagine what is utilitarian as being art and as being an essential and crucial part of the ways we move through any day involves art. And so it feels lucky to be able to sit here with you from this spot and talk with you about these things.
Looking good.
I got tired. When I sat down, I got tired. I was ready to. That's the thing. You don't want to let a Mojave sit down in midday. It could turn into a nap. And so I'm still in social distancing, so I will put my I will put my mask on when we go around the corner. So I'll kind of walk us also. So have you introduced Erin or?
No, I haven't. We really were just enjoying being outdoors and seeing that gorgeous blue sky.
Yeah, so I'm moving us to where we're going to begin. So some of what you're also seeing is, I'm going to break the fourth wall very quickly. You're also seeing something that's very lucky is behind us. We have a curator doing what is well and beyond what curators do, but also I think something that's been a lucky part, Maria, of your relationships. So where I am very selfishly starting us is at one of Maria's works. So bear with me while I find. Okay, I want to get up close so you can see. Pardon if I'm driving too quickly. I have a lead foot. All right, can you see that okay, Maria?
It looks good.
Yeah, so something that's really incredible too is like how you've made some of the objects, not in this way, but you've kind of opened them up to different sensualities. So when they are in the cases, they have, there are ways that you can interact with them in terms of thinking about, sound, sight, smell. So I'm putting on gloves right now, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally one of the things that when Erin Joyce, the curator who I worked with on this exhibition, when we were talking about it, one of the main things we wanted to do was to create space for bodies, for people. When we're in museum settings, so often the priority is on the work, protecting the work, conserving the work, showing the work, displaying it, and it's all often seen as very fixed. So we had a few strategies that we wanted to do. And because my work really uses everyday things, I want to have points of access for the public so everyone can kind of recognize a chair or, a glove or some point that there's these moments of relatability that everyone can kind of connect with.
Well, and especially thinking about some of the ways a lot of Indigenous museums are set up, and thinking about how a lot of times the objects aren't able to be in conversation with one another. And here we have so much of your work, that we're able to kind of move around it and feel the, not contemporariness, which is sometimes the way we dislocate it, but to feel like the presence of the work you're doing now and have done over the years and are still moving towards. So we're going to let you hear this. And I'll just shut up and do this, and then I'll talk about the sound for those of you who have a different sensuality with sound. I'm going to show you what this looks like. So can you imagine a fight? It wouldn't even be a fight. You'd end up loving the person that you were trying to fight with, but just so you can see up close. And for any of you that those are some of my boxing moves. Do you want to talk a little bit about the object of these?
Well, I just love seeing them being activated. Yeah, absolutely. So these are an item that I created with when I was working with a collaborator, Charlene Vickers, and we often would get together and we just mash things up and make things. And so this is one of those items that when we performed together, we each wore one. So we had one of these that was meant to represent strength and power and fighting and all of those good things. And then on the other hand, we had this really elegant red evening glove that had fringe. So it was like this balance between, you know, this really feminine kind of elegant womanhood, and then also this other space strength, and that these came together. And we both wore these and kind of mirrored and performed together with these items. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing, just in terms of us thinking, you know, about if the sound is not something that you're able to access, like the physicality of the sound, like in some ways, like I can never quite figure out if, you know, what this is reminding me of. It's almost like, it some ways feels like glass, but in some ways it feels like rain. Like if I could maybe hear exactly what each raindrop sounded like, exactly as it like touched the ground or touched some sort of surface, because it's such a sweet, sharp sound, and then all in concert, and it builds an energy in you that makes me just kind of want to. Yeah, it's such an electric. This is such an electric show, right down to the color, which some of you are probably recognizing, right?
Oh yeah, the little zaps and bolts of electric fluorescent. Yeah.
So we're heading up the stairs. Am I moving too quickly?
No, this is great.
Okay, so this is part of my favorite part of this is coming up the stairs.
But yeah, you're totally right about the way that when we're in museums, the way we're so used to seeing anything connected to any kind of Indigenous person or community, it's always in the past, distant, behind glass, removed, something we can't access. And so that was something that felt really urgent at the Herd, to be able to upend that a little bit so that we could feel connected, not only as the audience that we have some kind of access, but that it would speak to us and bring all of that energy and life and dynamic vibrations into the space.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such an interesting relationship when I think about it. And I know some of what we've been talking a little bit about is like migrations and borders and you know, especially just thinking about indigeneity and what it means to be migrated versus to naturally migrate. And there's a lot of times when we go through the collections, and you had mentioned this before, is that I'm up here by myself, so I'm gonna take this off. I feel like a fish, and we're like, it's like, like, but we were talking a little bit before about how often it's like one piece from each person, and that represents a region or an area, or, you know, like the collective universal voice, as if there is, and not that individually we don't collect and have an incredible power that affects, you know, the energies of the world and the energies of our different communities, but you know, thinking about that too, and like what this work opens up to, you know, to the guests who come in. And I'm thinking in particular how it's even activating right now some of the other works that are here alone and by themselves throughout the museum, and what this means for this relationship of bringing in, you know, what we call contemporary, but I think that's not a word that can quite hold what's happening in the indigenous art world. But thinking, of course, the relationship with Erin, but also you had said something in our conversation, and I wanted to trademark it, but and it's a very just straightforward and just clear statement. But you were talking about honoring. I should put your work behind us. You were talking about honoring our makers, like honoring the makers now, not like as artists and makers and people who are living lives versus artifacts and someone who has created an artifact that we want to hold still and pin down.
Yep, absolutely. Also, because there's so much work in the in what we think of as being artifacts or historical cultural items that are made by living people today, right? And so I think as an artist, one of the things that I can really bring is that specificity of my culture, my media, my practice. So as an artist, people will always ask, like, what kind of artist are you? Whereas when you're a native, they don't often ask, like, where are you from? Or what kind of native are you? And so as artists, we each have our own material language that we bring. And so I think by being an artist and having this exhibition in the space, then it opens up a possibility where other people, other makers in the museum can also be equally seen as artists in their own right, and that they have not only this one item, but you know, like one little quill box, but actually there's a whole body of work that they've made throughout their careers as well. And just imagine all of the complexity and detail and work and all of the items that go into that as well. I think that's hopefully that those are speaking to each other in that way. I mean, it's not so uncommon to see something like a jingle or a bell on a traditional item. You know, that's so connected to these ideas of water and life and beginning, right down to being in the womb. And I think that's a really considered a really sacred and special medicine as well, to hear those sounds of something like a jingle or a bell.
Yeah, and that makes me, you know, it's such a generous space to think, you know, visually, of course, because we're in the museum looking, but also just the ways that you express that in all of the languages, from what we hear, you know, to what we're able to see, but also like the energy that moves, you know, in our bodies. And we're standing in front of Vestige Vagabond. And I wanted to, oops, you're still there. Yeah. And something that I know is really important to you, and something that I feel like I've learned a lot from you in how to move in this way is, you know, what is the collective imagination? And so, of course, thinking about the jingle and the jingle dance and the jingle dresses and what that means when we all join somewhere out there in that energy and in that, you know, relationship. And so I'm thinking, you know, and about the idea of collective, the idea of collaboration. And even if you think there's a difference, like I have lately been wondering, is there a difference between what is collaborative and what is collective? And what is that, you know, what is the language? Is the language different if we're thinking about those things as separate, or, you know, is one within the other? But we'll, you know, if you want to kind of talk about that too, and we can look at this piece a little bit, and I'll try to pull us up a little bit more closely to it.
Yeah, oh, I know that's such a big question, like to ask what about a collective ownership versus a collaborative. I mean, when I think of collaborative, that's so often about making. And when I collaborate with people, it's often with people who have skill sets or expertise outside of my own. And so when we're working together, we're creating something that wouldn't be possible individually, right? So then collectively you may own that. And that's also different than having someone who's a participant in something, right? Getting someone to participate. It's different than collaborating where the whole, and for me, that really begins at the seed of the idea, the original, the moment you want to work together, and you work through all of that together to kind of push and balance every kind of component to come up with something that's beyond. And so
I love these.
Collective ownership is very different, because that would mean that, I mean, I suppose in a similar way, if it's a collaborative enterprise that or project, then it would be a collective ownership, right? No matter how many people are participating. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to show. So this has well, for some of you might even still have this. I think all natives have like 2 uncles who still have these, and who still use them as they go to the gym, and who are always in like a hoodie and double sweatshirts. But I'm going to go ahead and open this the cassette. Which does still play. So if you want to kind of take a look at this.
Yeah. Anishinaabe Mada. Yeah. So that was so these are 2 outfits that Charlene and I were wearing when we worked together as Vestige Vagabond, and we had these, we both had the same Walkman, so we might have been those 2 uncles, right?
I can see it.
And one was, and in both cassettes we had different tapes, and that one is a Anishinaabe language tape so we would speak some of what we were hearing as we were listening and performing, so that the language was kind of part of that component.
Yeah, I like thinking about that, especially I think now with how some of us are in like a fight for our language of sorts, and that fight happens in very different ways, sometimes very direct ways, sometimes it happens in whatever small pieces you can gather, but to imagine the language, that it's moving always, and it'll arrive to you at some point, or you will arrive to it, but it's there, a kind of waiting. Like so many things I feel like have been held and stopped of our many, different cultures, but the language is still moving somewhere always. Are you still there, Maria?
I am, yeah.
Oh, I see 2 of me. I could get a lot more work done like this though. But yeah, so we're kind of we're now moving into something that this was like one of the first ways I came to your work was through this texture, this materiality. And so, yeah, so do you want to talk a little bit more about thinking about, let me give you the whole image here.
Yeah, thanks for showing this one. So this is a piece I made, I think it was the day that I had, I was looking at Instagram and then saw that Robert Morris had passed away, and as an artist who had worked with felt and really appreciated the materiality of it and working with letting it do what it does through its material, letting the material speak its language. So as an artist also working with felt, I really wanted to kind of honor him, and came up with this really simple piece, which was draping and showed these connections between sky and earth, and thinking about recovery and loss and remembering. So this is the piece that I made, and then instantly rolled it up and tucked it away. But yeah, I think that this
I can't get the whole thing. Try to get it all out. Yeah. I'm not old enough yet to get the whole thing out, but
And then we're just seeing those little crosses, which are showing like balance and harmony and a mirroring and the symmetry. Yeah.
I can show them this. See if I can get a full cross here to look at.
Oh, that looks great.
There it is. And I don't know if you're up for it. I mean, I'm so like just thinking about felt. I think it's a texture that we all know in some way. But you know, I'm even thinking like, what does it mean as like a kind of a body of making, a body of being in like collaboration with it as you're making it. Yeah, like what are some of the ways that you relate to it, you know, from that kind of opening? So you were, in some ways, I think you were like invited into it by, you know, by them leaving and then opening this to you. But yeah, and so you work a lot in it, and so we're gonna move over and we can talk a little bit more about it.
Okay, so felt is just this material that just keeps, I feel like it just keeps giving and giving to me. So initially it was absolutely this chance to like push against expectations. So I felt like if I was using something like birch bark or a quill, that would be, you know, a material that would that's so fetishized and seen as indigenous or native and would be expected, and it would shut down the fullness of what those materials represented. So in this day and time, I felt like felt was a more, or is a more kind of ethical kind of choice for me as someone who lives in the city. And also that the felt initially was a way for me to rebel and be like, this is so industrial. This is like, it's about progress. It's about new technologies. And it allowed me to kind of make that connection with other items as well. So what we're looking at here are a whole bunch of replicas of different things. So it's a way for me to talk about old technologies, new technologies. So something like a Walkman or a large format camera, and that all of these things in a hierarchy of objectness, right, or material would suddenly become equal through the felt. So it was this kind of equalizer that happened in the same way that the globe, suddenly we're not seeing, usually when we look at a globe, we're seeing the borders, you know, that's all erased. All we're seeing here is land and water, right, represented. So yeah, it just kind of, as I made objects of the felt, I got to know it a little bit more, work with different densities, all kinds of different, you know, thicknesses of the felt. And it was something that was very sculptural and allowed me to work and think about, and not get caught up in things like color or other elements. And it was also very textural. And also, because of the nature of it, allowed me to work in a way that's so familiar to me. So sewing and stitching things together, it's also incredibly forgiving. So it can be a challenge to light and to show. So I'm often trying to find different, yeah, so I think I've pretty much figured that out. But what we're seeing here is this, so this particular piece is called Travel Bag. So this idea that no matter where you are in the world, that you're carrying who you are. And so if you know who you are, you can go anywhere in the world. And in that way, if we're thinking of migration, we're not stuck to one particular region or territory. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my only critique of this is those sunglasses. Is that your style of sunglasses? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I think with the felt, something that also draws me is that, you know, in some ways, as you're saying, like they're like equalizing or like maybe a decentering of some of the ways that we tend to like value our senses. Like, okay, this is a color and it means this, or it excites me, or it makes me hungry, or, you know, it has some sort of hierarchy in some ways related to our senses and many other things. And even thinking about like the globe, I'm going to come back to the globe. But because it's the felt, like there's an immediate, for me, there's an immediate sensorial like touch. Like when I look at it with my eye, it's a touch. Like what I sense is touch. Like and especially the felt is so thick, like it's such a, it's a skin. It's a, yeah. And like, so I feel like as these things, they be as we're talking about objects, right? But they're objects that in some way I feel like just return me to my body. So that in some ways they like disallow making them symbols, right? Like the globe means this, or the umbrella means this, the hat box. I think especially the hat box, considering Indigenous objects and the hats and what the hats have meant to us over time. So is there anything else you want to visit up here before we?
Well, why don't we go back down to the first floor?
All right.
And a lot of the, as we go down to the first floor, so some of those objects too are things that just remind me of my time when I lived in New York. So like an umbrella. Every time it rained, you would find like so many umbrellas on the street. And yeah, or a disposable. I also have in the trophy case, I think a disposable, like a takeaway coffee cup. And that was something that shocked me when I moved there from Vancouver, because in Canada at the time, everyone we'd have our own travel mugs. So you wouldn't go and get a takeaway. But in New York, because you're on the street, you don't want to have a lot of things to carry. So it was just this kind of other mobility and movement that you're constantly having in that city.
Yeah, and like this crazy notion, like what we've done in nationhood and empire with migration, that we've put in front of it as if it's an unnatural condition, but also the idea that natives travel and natives go to trips to Europe, and they do these things not just for art, but for the same curiosities that carried us to migrate, when we were still ourselves before the nation, and now we are ourselves within the nation. And so that's another reason why I think these objects are so important, because they represent movement and motion, and that we're always in motion, and and it defies like making us static and holding us. I'm standing here because I want to put this bag on my arm.
Put it on.
I just want to say that my aunties would fight me for this bag. This bag. I'm going to see if Erin can get me with the bag on. Erin, can you get my full bag?
Love it. Yeah, that's totally my performance bag. Where
do you wear it over your shoulders or on your shoulder? Do you wear it across or
across? Yeah.
That's right. I don't want to mess up my bun, but
yeah.
God, just think how many berries could you gather in this? How many scarves could you buy? God, how many snacks? I'm thinking of all the snacks.
Yeah,
Yeah, is there, like, how are you thinking about the size of this bag? Because it makes me think of like abundance, and yeah, I mean, it's incredible.
For sure. Yeah, that's my more kind of like, historians love that bag because it references Anishinaabe bandolier bag, a more historical bag. So that was my version for me. So, and every time I perform, I just have everything. So often when you perform, you bring everything you need and then you perform and then you leave, right? So it's a treat to have an exhibition where things can stay and people can return and see it. But in other times when I'm just kind of entering into a space to perform, whether it's a public space or a private space, that's how that bag would function. So it would have everything in it, from like my water to my little hand towel to whatever it is.
I love too, just like that you just introduced, like the idea of return, because again, I feel like that's something that you are entering and reminding of, or reminding us that return is a natural part of migration. Like, again, we're so tied to this idea of, migration for us now has so many negativities. It's like, wait, I want to make my life better, and my home is not good, so I'm going to this other place, or the conditions are such that I must leave this place to live, or for my children to live. And and yes, those are parts of migration, and you know, and that's like point A to point B, and you stay at point B. But thinking about migration as a relationality, like it implies a return, right? Like you migrate and you return in some way, and maybe in best scenarios you return inland, but you also return in other ways. And I'm thinking a lot about that and the relationship you've built here in the herd, and thinking about like a kind of progression of presence versus, again, like, okay, I'm here and I'm out, but your interaction with the community, and also activating the space in terms of performance, you know, like what it means to let these things live and have their own energies and beings. And so we might be able to talk to this, because what I would like to do as we kind of close out, just to kind of to pan some of these stands with the objects on them, and kind of show the ways that like you've intended them to move. And then we're going to end on one of my favorite parts of the show. So I'll save that as like a ta-da surprise. But you want to talk a little bit about, because we mentioned this earlier, even just thinking about like some of the structures of these.
Yeah, so you can see the clear casters at the bottom, that those structures are meant to be moved. So we could almost imagine that in a performance on this, what appears to be a runway, I suppose now, but that imagination that these things could get moved and pushed aside, pushed to the end, and that performance might happen in that space. Right, yeah. So you can
Here's me activating it.
What's
I also
great,
just want to show off my shoes. But even,
yeah.
I'm even thinking like what it means that I just turned this around. Do you know, like what does that even mean for like what is being said, or how this is occurring in this space?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of authority around that too, like who gets to do that and why and how. And I really like the idea of when we're looking at design the exhibition, of this prospect of having like 3 occasions where there would be a return or a guest that would be in the exhibition that could then activate that site, and that things would happen and items would move and maybe things would be worn and reworn, and we get to see all that kind of imagining. So we're not just seeing an object fixed in time and space, but also the possibility that comes with it, with everything around it. I see, oh, Tara Hogue has a question, and she was asking if there's anything inside of that bag now. I'm pretty sure it's empty, but there was a time when I was leaving things in it, and sometimes those things would go missing. So I had like little wooden tokens that I would give away.
Yeah. There was a wallet in it, but it's in my pocket now. I want to just say that I didn't return that. So I don't know if you'll feel a tingle anywhere that is no longer where it was. And it was a silver tongue. This is called silver tongue, by the way. I hadn't said what that was. Yeah. I haven't done a very good job of and this, I mean, I just want to make a note of this. Like we were talking about sensualities, and it's so difficult because we're so tethered to our own. And so I could have done a better job of talking about some of these textures and things. But this is a silver lame, which I used to say lame until I was like 14. And it has a polyester feel, but it's really shiny and soft, but it also feels really like solid. Like when you hold it, you know you're like holding something. It's almost like I'm supposed to be holding this. So in some ways, like to have my hand filled with it kind of, yeah, makes me myself right now. But
well, and of course, it seems somewhat natural that you end up with the piece called Silver Tongue as the person who's often speaking words and
running my mouth. Okay, so we are and so anything you want to talk about, Maria? I know I mean, this is just lucky for me to experience the show alongside you, and my guess is that it's also lucky for others to be able to be in some ways in this space, right? I think we're learning what space and presence are in a different way, which doesn't come without its troubles. Like we know technology is very extractive, and we know what we're doing right now in some ways is these technologies will end up in someone's homelands where they're trying to deal with the waste and, you know, what's being extracted. And it's also, I mean, I think there's also a very generative way, and I think you mentioned it earlier when we were looking at the felt objects, is that technology it's natural. Like we think of technology as this very capitalistic, extractive nature, but that's not, I mean, all of the things we developed, the bag, you know, I think touch is a technology, you know, like all of these ways we've learned to be beings, from whether it's the way trees hold water, you know, now I'm starting to talk like my elders. I'm just running off and on. But anyway, I think the technology part is really important. And so I'm going to bring us to this space here. And I'm going to do something that I'm so excited about doing. I'm actually just going to hold this. I'm going to hold this here so that you can be as surprised as I. I don't usually take my shoes off like this because I'm so careful with my sneakers, but. All right, this is one of the things I've looked forward to. I'm gonna try to make it quiet for a second so you don't hear it while I'm putting these on. And you know, Mojaves have very tiny feet, so Maria's feet are much larger. No, I'm kidding. I think these are size 9s, right?
Yes.
Size 9 is like a small in Mojave, so it's all right. Okay, here we go. And we were joking that I said Mojaves just have like a 2-step. So I said I was working really hard, but there was no jingle sound coming out. So I had to do a 3-step in order to make it move. But I'm just gonna, just so you can hear a little. Can you start to hear it?
Yeah.
And there's an exhibit of yours, a video of you jumping up and down, which has a really beautiful sound, which is hard to show in this museum setting. So I'm just gonna show you my feet as I go. I'm just kidding, I was getting fancy with my steps. So it's really, I thought it was a beautiful way, like, to move us toward our closing and thinking about that. But are there things you want to, like, kind of, if it's all right, I'm going to just keep them on as we're finishing this. So we'll hopefully hear them a little in the background.
I just love it. I have another piece that's not in this show. It's called Jingle Spiral. And after I made it, I couldn't imagine performing in it. I just didn't, you know, my own movements. But then I had my sister Deanne, who's a competition powwow dancer. She wore it in another performance that we did, and her movement vocabulary just brought a whole other dimension, because she was holding her arms out, because she's fancy shawl, you know, she the sound. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, I felt like I learned so much about dance and movement and my own work through seeing it activated through this other body. So thank you so much for bringing some life into those boots, who, as they've been sitting there for the run of the exhibition.
Yeah. I feel lucky to put them on. Maria and I'm going to walk them back to their spot. Maria and I were joking because I was saying that I didn't know if I was strong enough to put them on. And I was afraid that when I put them on, there'd be a flash of light. And then when the camera came back on, I would be sitting in the corner with a perm or something. And I think, I mean, we're coming close to the end of our time. And so I think we can kind of shift. I don't know if some folks have asked questions and, you know, that we want to.
Yeah, we have a few questions showing up in the chat. Someone asked about the title for the exhibition. Yeah, that really is meant to, it's pretty open, but I wanted to, because there was a number of works in the show, just really show, capture this idea of a journey and point to something that's larger than us. And so the sun felt like something that we're all connected through, and it's vital, and it felt fitting for Phoenix to think of the sun. And at the same time, it's also something that gives to us, but at the same time, you know, you wouldn't want to fly into the sun, right? Or when you, that idea of going too close to the sun. So there's a lot of different connections I've had around that particular title. And
it feels like you were on your way here the whole time, right? Like, I feel like with that title, you know, like we say, your dream to be here. So I feel like that title knew, you know, the language knew, and now you're here with us.
Yeah. What other questions? Let's see what else are here. Ivy. Okay. Is there anything you want to share about, there's two questions here. One is about, that's coming from Facebook, which is about this idea of a poetic language. Are there any, since I'm here with a poet, are there any works in the exhibition that involve or could be described as poetic language?
I think I'll hop in and then you can take over. But I mean, I think it's all poetic language. I think the beautiful thing about poetry is that it's not letting words be font or text or symbols of things. It, you know, poetry in some ways is acknowledging the impossibility of language, like that it's an energy of the body and of the land, and we do our best to hold it, right? Like we do our best to shape it and to tend to it and cultivate it so that it arrives to people in ways that are generous, or even that, you know, thinking about, I mean, and this is a question too that I might have to add to theirs for you, Maria. But when I think about sometimes the language I make, it makes me more, and it lets me know myself in different ways and love myself differently. And so there's a different like acknowledgement. And I mean, I feel like your objects are language. This color throughout it's a language. And so so I'll kind of add to their question on the way to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, it's reminding me of the performance that we did together where we were matching, where we had hand-to-hand action that I was leading as a gesture, and then you were leading through words, right? And talking through a speech act. And that movement is not something you would do when you're normally in the public. And when I perform, I don't usually speak. So we were both using something we weren't necessarily familiar with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that so often what I talk about when I would teach drawing was I would talk about thinking with your hands. So this idea of making, that things are happening in a way that might seem intuitive, but that we're also coming from, you know, experience and connections and previous things that experiments I had tried before. So in this way, yeah, all of these materials open up for me possibility and new imaginings, and by not having them fixed in a place, it allows for us to when we see it, to as an exhibition about performance art, to think about, well, what else might happen around it, what else could be possible. And I feel like that's for me an exciting space to be in.
Yeah, it's even like when you're writing, like when you're saying the hand's thinking, we think we know what we're writing, but somehow our hand knows in some ways ahead of us. So thinking even about a line of text, as you were saying, the line of text is moving into something that's around it that it will make estimations of, but will never quite be able to hold. And I've never been so sore as I was after that performance, because I didn't realize what it meant to stand in an energetic space like that, to move and perform in that way. And I mean, I was literally sore. My glutes, I didn't realize like how I had held myself.
Right.
So it was an amazing experience. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that we have 3 minutes left. I know there's some other questions about Center for the Imagination. Yeah, and I'm just reading more comments here about what we're working on now. But I want to also take this opportunity to kind of invite back our other hosts and also to acknowledge Erin Joyce, the curator of the exhibition, who has been roaming around.
Wait, it's really beautiful where Erin is because there's a silhouette behind her and she was getting an angle. So.
Doubling. So I think that relationship with the curator and an institution is a really special one, and to be able to have someone who you can trust and who really supports and returns back and honors the works in such a respectful way is just such a privilege. So I just really enjoyed working with I enjoy working with contemporary art curators and all kinds of curators, but thank you so much to Erin and the Herd and to you, Natalie, for joining me.
No, it's always my luck, anytime.
Well, what an amazing gift to experience this exhibition with you. I mean, we're stuck in the Bay Area. We can't go to any kinds of real museum spaces. We've been dying to see this show. And the way that you've taken us through there, it's been so visceral and so sensory. I've just really felt like we were completely there. So thank you so much. And also, Maria, I know you were thinking a lot about this, that we were all just so Zoom fatigued at this point. And you've just kind of reinvented the format in such a great, fantastic way. And it's really exciting. And I hope I'm sure it's going to make us really think differently about how we organize these programs moving forward and the innovative ways we can use it. I did, there's a couple of things. I wanted to take a moment to mention that the exhibition is going to be up until November 15th. So if anybody can visit, that would be great. And also to just give a shout out about Natalie's new book of poetry, A Post-Colonial Love Poem, which is available for purchase. And we're going to post a link in the chat. Nathan, if you could help with that, that would be great. And I know we're running out of time, but I wondered, if you could just tell us a little bit about your work together at the Center for Imagination in the Borderlands and its mission. And, obviously the conversation that you've been having about migration, I'm imagining is related to conversations you've had around this work, but I'd be really interested to hear more about the mission of the center and the work that you're doing. It sounds really amazing.
Yeah, it's really lucky. And Maria and Carolina Caicedo are our first Borderlands fellows. And it was really important for us to think about indigeneity, because for us, we're really, the Center for Imagination in the Borderlands is very much using the lens of place and not necessarily just location or, markers of a city or markers of a university, but what it means to be in a place, which is how you arrive there, how you are received there, the energies and stories that happen there, and how that shapes your imagination of one another, of what is possible, of the ways we look, toward what has happened and what is yet to happen. And the fact that we are it's a collaboration with Ver Listener. So we are literally migrating back and forth. So Maria coming from Toronto, Carolina is based in East LA. We are where we are in Phoenix, which again, Akama Atam and Pipash land, and then Ver Listener in New York. And, being able to think about migration as a kind of seeding. So it moving from one place to the other, but what moves with us is also our stories, the ways we look at things. And when we leave, we always leave a little bit of ourselves behind. And so as we leave, we are changed. And as we leave, those who we are leaving are also changed. And then again, just that possibility for return. So, and some of these ideas have developed alongside Maria and her work over the last 4 or 5 years since I've known her. And so it's been very much a collective imagining for me. You know, being seated by some of these people and Maria in particular in her work, and then, you know, having the opportunities to tend them through relationships to see what happens next has been really lucky. So, and gracias for giving us the moment of time to talk a little bit about that. So.
Yeah, we were really excited to continue to follow that work. So thank you.
Yeah, gracias.
Do you have any comments, Kelly?
Well, first of all, Maria, congratulations and thank you so much. It's a shame we had COVID during the center of the exhibition, and it's a thrill the exhibition has had this length of life. We have people on Facebook who have been to see it and are sort of giving a shout out, and it's, you know, I wish we could be there in person. I wish I could see those jingle gloves in person. I think somebody had posted the question and it went through my mind and I think I know the answer, but this kind of stretch of yellow, the fluorescent that runs through the show, just briefly, what was that in the design? It's in the artworks as well, and it's really quite wonderful.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it really is just a, for me, a continuous energy line, a pop of color, something to, that straddles both. You know, we see this in nature too, right? We see this with different types of like a June bug or a lightning bug or different insects. So just wanting to have a color that's both cautious and unifies things, but also speaks about, maybe makes things a little bit not so comfortable, right? Like that allows things to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's also about visibility and, you know, marking edges and practicality as well. So when I'm performing with a 2x4, it's nice for me to see where the ends are. So there's also like really just logistical reasons why it works for me well. Everything is about function and practicality, and of course there's an aesthetic and a beauty to it as well, but I kind of straddle between something refining things overly so, and then also that it's there to do a certain purpose and it's achieving that. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's terrific. And to Natalie's point about the felt and that sort of desire to touch it, I remember the first time I learned of your work and saw that sort of thick felt and all of them, that gray sort of, and that desire to be wrapped in it or to feel it. And it was really quite visceral. This was fantastic. This was a real treat for us. And I think Donna's absolutely right. Another new way to think about this Zoom space as our sort of global square, you know, where we can quite literally come together. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie.
No, gracias. I forgot I didn't have the gloves on that last time. Sorry, Maria.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Just thank you all again so much. Thank everyone for joining us today, and ask Kelly if she could let us know what's going to be coming up in Scratchbase next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Donna. I don't want today to end, but this is as it goes. Next week, we'll be joined by composer and performer Matt Petty, along with playwright and lyricist Alva Rogers and moving image artist Lisa Crafts. Together, we'll discuss the collaboration on Weeping Mary and the experimental video created with the release of the song composed by Petty after visiting the former Freedom Colony in Weeping Mary, Texas. Alva, Matt, and Lisa will talk about the important work and their decision to release Weeping Mary in honor of George Floyd and his loss of life in late May, and the anti-racism movements that have followed after his death. Thank you all for joining us today. You're muted. Donna, you're on mute. come back.
I'm sorry. I was trying to mute my dog who's making noise in the background. So just thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward very much to seeing you next week for Scratch Space episode 7. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that image. Thank you, Erin Joyce.